Hey guys, this is me, Lancelot. As you know, I'm part of Rory's crew now. And even though I should be doing a critical overview with him, I'm not, because you see, I decided to do Mushishi with another guy. Hey! Say hi to everyone.
Hi, I'm Franco, sup?
For all those who don't know, he's a CYX77 from Hummingbird, but if you wish to check it out, then cool. Right now we will be doing an overview of Mushishi. So with that being said, let's move on to Episode 1.
Episode 1. The Green Seed.
Ginko goes over to this boy's house to investigate him or sort of study him, where his drawings start to come to life. I found this was a rather dull episode. Nothing really particularly happening. It was just a very big exposition dump to get people into the series.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I remember the first episode not being anything really special. I think it does set the world and gives you a sense of what you're getting into. Definitely get the sense of the atmosphere, but with only one episode in, I don't think it really offers much. Looking back on it, it was one of the more forgettable episodes, but it certainly wasn't a horrible start. At least I wanted to kind of see more of this world.
It just kind of like set itself up, but didn't start off particularly great. It's just nothing we can really say there.
Episode 2. The Light of Eyelid.
Gets dark and doesn't fuck around with your opinions about it.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about Mushishi as a series is that it doesn't always convey the same message by the end of the episode. Sometimes it will take on a peaceful or a happy, positive view. Sometimes you're going to get a more depressing sort of ending or theme. I think it's a little bit rarer because generally a show will either just say, we're going to make every episode depressing or we're going to make every episode uplifting. So the contrast, I think, in this episode really did help.
It definitely alleviated sort of the lighthearted feel the first episode gave. It told basically a very sad story of how a girl's parents abandoned her because they couldn't do anything, and how for most of her life she's been in seclusion and couldn't do anything. Her friend is affected by her sickness. It just shows how terrible this world can be and how unfair it is. But it's also another thing. This isn't necessarily the Mushi's fault. The Mushi are doing what they do. They're not evil. They're just creatures that do whatever they need to do.
Sort of plays on the duality of nature, much like fire or water. A lot of literature, they'll use something like water is a purifying agent, it's healing, but it also has destructive force in the form of storms and tsunamis. And so I think Mushishi plays with that with the Mushi, that the Mushi can be this harmony with the world, but they can also have this effect on it, and it's sort of whether or not things are in balance.
Speaking of which of literature, you can actually see that, in essence, Mushishi's a cultivation of 26 short stories, or more if we're going to count the new season, but I have not given an account on that.
It takes all these different, very Eastern feeling stories, and it brings them together, and it's like a little storybook, a collection that you can read.
Basically, the only real character you can really bond with was Ginko, which, to be honest, he isn't that great of a character.
The reason that Ginko is fairly static and unchanging speaks to the kind of show Mushishi is. It's an episodic show where you can really watch it in any order, and I think that would be impossible to do if they had significant development of his character at all.
Yeah, you can watch it however way you want, and that's the beauty of Mushishi. It's very much just a show that you come in not expecting much. It doesn't have to focus on the characters, but I really would have appreciated maybe some more character development from these shows. It may be something, so it didn't feel as static, but I really can't complain, though, with what they were doing. And for writing purposes, it's definitely one of the better cases you can find in episodic anime.
He's the character that knows who he is, knows what he needs to do. He seems like he's a developed character already, and he's not important. His development's not that important. It's not the characters. It's not even the stories themselves. It's the setting.
Yeah, even though the characters themselves don't make up the story, it's the world itself that is the character which you're more attached to.
And you really feel like these Mushi could exist and that they are a natural, genuine part of the world rather than a silly plot device like so many other series have used.
Yeah, it's a very unique sort of experience.
Episode 3. Tender Horns.
Tackles on a different aspect of Mushi, such as death, and it shows that certain sicknesses can attribute to the Mushi, how ill-fated can be caused by Mushi. So it also adds a small little layer of depth there. And I definitely appreciated what they were doing, although it's another one of those cases where it just kind of felt a bit drab for an episode, because it's like Ginko knew what he was doing. It wasn't bad, it was just kind of meh.
Episode 4. The Pillow Pathway.
About a farmer who has a dream Mushi. Apparently, even dreams themselves can be affected by these things. It's also a very big tragedy story about this one man who has this ability of predicting what's going to happen in the future because apparently his dreams can come true. It was a very good episode. It just gave this very good sense of setting and just sort of layout for how the Mushi can interact with people. And here it just shows the Mushi can cause even more destruction, as one of his dreams depicted his whole village being withered away, and it came true. And it sort of foreshadowed also his end when Ginkgo was mentioning how you can't mess with the Mushi, for they're only doing what they're told. And when he tried to get rid of the Mushi, he only ended up killing himself. And it was a really, really depressing anime because it shows how unforgiving these Mushi are to you.
I think the best way to describe them is they're sort of amoral or apathetic. They don't know the difference between the things that they do. They just act, and whatever way we perceive them to act is either good or bad. So in this case, we sympathize with the man who has to deal with this problem, but I don't think of the Mushi as any more or less amoral than they already are. It's much like an animal, right? An animal doesn't know right from wrong, and neither do the Mushi.
They're only doing what they're supposed to do.
Episode 5, The Traveling Swamp.
It talks about this swamp that has this girl following her all the time. But we later learn it's a specific type of Mushi, obviously because it's a moving swamp. But the Mushi's thing is that if you drink too much of its water, you slowly become water itself. And to me, that's kind of terrifying to know that.
Episode 6, Those Who Inhale the Dew. It's basically about a girl who dies at the end of a day and then comes back to life. And she's been afflicted by this Mushi. She basically is reincarnated. And Ginkgo comes to the town to heal this girl of her affliction. When he heals her, she goes back to the way she was on purpose. And the reason she does this, she says, living one day as your whole life, you feel the sense of fulfillment. You feel the sense of completion. When I live like a normal person nowadays, time moves so slowly. I feel so empty. And I loved how there was this sense of dependence. She had experienced what it was like to live in a fleeting moment. And when she's brought back to being a human, she can't deal with it and she reverts back. And I love how it shows that even Ginkgo, sometimes he's trying to fix a problem. And in the end, things just go back to the way they were. The first time in the series you saw that Ginkgo didn't have full control over what was happening. He could influence things, but even when he tried to change, it sometimes reverted back to normal. Episode 7, Raindrops and Rainbows.
Dedicated to a rainbow. This man feels ashamed that his father really likes these rainbows and how he wants to prove to everyone that his father wasn't crazy anymore. And it's very nice. It's a very sweet episode, and I liked it.
The journey aspect, I think, is much in line with the concept of Mushishi, which is this journey that Ginkgo is going on and meeting all these different towns and places. So, Episode 8, Where Sea Meets Man.
Talks about this man's rather tragic past where he was run out of business by his wife's father. Co-workers basically lied about it to his father, so now his father hates him. So now he's basically trying to stay with his wife, waiting for her, hoping she'll come back. By the end of it, it was showing how merciless the Mushi are to these people, how they do things based on instinct. They're never trying to do something based on morality. A very nice episode about a character who still is haunted by his past and how he almost doesn't want to let go. Ended tragically and rather openly of how he's going to deal with this.
The woman's kimono washes up on the shore and it fades to the credits or something very similar to that. I just thought it was so aesthetically beautiful. Episode 9, The Heavy Seed.
It talks about this one village who every harvest season, a natural disaster that always occurs, but they have always the best harvest by this time. It's the work of a little seed. It basically creates the best harvest imaginable. The problem is it requires the sacrifice of one person. The chief himself, who basically sets out to do this, knows he's doing the wrong thing by having a sacrifice, but he's doing what he believes is the best. And even though you sort of see the man being in the wrong because of him wanting to kill one person off every year, you understood that it was for the greater benefit of many.
Episode 10, The White Witch Lives Within the Inkstone.
It was like a more typical problem that I could come across. It's like, here are the kids who are about to die because they're apparently dropping in temperature. It was not a bad episode. It was just meh completely. It didn't really do anything. There was no real tension because you knew it was going to happen by the end. And even the exploration of this woman's life wasn't that engaging. So by the end of it, you just did not care.
Episode 11, The Sleeping Mountain.
Talks about when Ginkgo goes to this mountain village where he meets the guardian. You learn about what this guy did to become the guardian of the mountain. See both his pity and his selfishness, and it also showed off how godlike these Mushi can become. The last sort of 5 minutes, it was just Ginkgo sitting on his box and just staring straight dead-faced into this Mushi that just killed the god. And it was really interesting to see how fearless he is.
Episode 12, One-Eyed Fish. I was waiting to find where Ginkgo was, and I couldn't find him. And then about halfway through, I realized, hey, this is his backstory. And instantly, it became one of my favorites, just because we got some character exposition. It's not really development. This was him beforehand, but it came out of nowhere. Really, it's halfway through the series. There's no indication that this was coming at all.
And it was a really very special episode to me because it also just developed Ginkgo. It actually made Ginkgo have sort of a backstory. You sort of see where he's coming from.
Episode 13, One Night Bridge.
Where they literally include zombies. Ginkgo goes to this bridge and discovers there's this one girl who fell through and that she survived the fall, apparently. There's this Mushi that when attached to a person can technically keep them alive, but they're already dead because no one has ever survived that sort of fall. This boy's lover, that basically was the result of her falling off a cliff, wants to save her and wants to run away with her. But Ginkgo sort of tells him the bad news and he doesn't take it at heart. Rather interestingly sort of tragic irony. There's this one scene where Ginkgo was saying, you have to move forward or else you'll never get it. And it was a very interesting thing because it showed that this guy was still stuck in the past, that he was still wanting everything to stay the same even though it wasn't. And as a result, he fell off the bridge that was made from these Mushi. In a sort of ironic karma, he becomes sort of his fiancée that was killed through the same means.
Episode 14, Inside the Cage.
Ginkgo goes to a labyrinth of sorts, where he basically, can I get out of this bamboo forest because there's a specific man there, and he apparently can never get out of it. And it ends sort of tragically with the fact that his wife and child are dead because they cut down the bamboo tree that was trapping him and his wife and child there, but also was the one thing giving them nourishment, so they died. In a more sort of uplifting element, in the last bit, there's these two bamboo shoots, which have babies crying from it, which just sort of gives this uplifting mood that maybe he's not alone anymore.
Episode 15, Pretense of Spring.
Character study of Ginkgo becoming sort of a father figure almost betrayed the tone of the series because it was like weird slice of life with Ginkgo and these two characters. This is one of my least favorite of any of the Mushishi because it completely betrayed the whole tone of the series.
Episode 16, Sunrise Serpent.
Another one I really hated because it was like this weird story about this boy who was worried about his mother losing her memories little by little. It just moved around and jumped around and tried to talk. This was also one of the most forgettable episodes I can really remember. I really don't even remember that much about it. Talks about her trying to find his father, finds out the father is living with someone else.
Episode 17, Pickers of Empty Cocoons.
Another one of the ones I disliked just because of its ending. But up to that ending, it was definitely a very good idea because it returned back to the setting and expansion and explained how the Mushishi sort of contact one another. And it's through these things called the Udos. And it was a really unique idea. And I was like, yes, you're back to what you're doing. It also had sort of a semi-tragic backstory of how this girl lost her sister and how it was technically her fault. She was being told that she needs to get over the fact that she may never see her sister again. And then they contradict the move by just bringing her sister back through one of the Udos. So it's like, why did you do that?
Episode 18, Clothes That Embrace the Mountain.
Talk about this guy who wanted to be a painter for a long time. He was not ready for the attributations of becoming a famous painter and how he would be overworked and stressed. He even forgot what was most important to him by the end of it. Sort of interesting episode, if only a bit forgettable.
Episode 19, String from the Sky.
It was like a Mushi disguised as a comet moving through the stars. It had this weird sort of tongue thing it extracted to get food. I loved the aspect of just... And if they stuck with exploring this Mushi more, I would have really loved it. Too bad they didn't do that. They weirdly and oddly enough talk more about the characters. And again, because characters are two-dimensional, you don't really care what's going on. And in this case, they're even one note.
Episode 20, A Sea of Writing.
The writer was very pessimistic. Oh, we can't hurt the Mushi. The Mushi are our friends. And it's like, they literally throw in an evil Mushi, or a forbidden Mushi of some kind. So I feel like that it also betrayed sort of the tonnage for that sort of episode. But overall, it did a good job in getting me interested and really did lay out this marvelous atmosphere of trying to see how these Mushi script scrolls are being held. And it was a marvelous world-building episode. I liked it a lot for that.
Episode 21, Caught in Changeling.
Hands down, one of the most depressing episodes I can remember. The Mushi in question here is probably the biggest pinnacle of what happens when a Mushi has absolutely no restraint and you don't control a Mushi. And it's this episode that shows you the danger of it. Went into this impregnated woman and basically replaced her son with itself. And the fact that these Mushi were actually talking was very interesting to me, because it showed Mushi were intelligent beings, that they could do whatever they wanted to do. The parents went deliberately against Ginkgo's word and advice for them, and they gradually grew into a problem. It basically destroyed the couple's home and basically left them penniless. And it was a really sad story because they didn't even have the children they were protecting so hard for. And it was so creepy because it was just talking in this so inhumane voice. It was one of those few times I could say Nami that it gave me shivers because I was terrified of this thing.
Episode 22, Shrine in the Sea.
It shows that the Mushi can kind of play God with people if you know how to use them correctly. There's this island full of people, and it takes this sort of idea of what happens if your lover or if someone you know is going to die, and you can just resurrect them again and again and again. How would you react to it? There was this old man and this young woman. This used to be her lover once upon a time.
Episode 23, The Sound of Rust. So basically, this girl has afflicted with this ability that whenever she speaks, rust grows on everything. It hurts people. It has effects on buildings. And Ginkgo has to try to figure out what's going on. It was sort of a mystery episode for me. I wasn't sure. Wanted to get to the bottom of the case and find out what was happening. Just another way that the Mushi can interact and one of the effects that they can have. I thought it was one of the more interesting episodes because it had that effect.
Deters because it again tries to focuses on sort of the character's struggles, and it just doesn't work when that happens. By the end of it, it just doesn't feel as unique as I wanted to. But definitely one of the better things I saw of it.
Episode 24. The Journey to the Field of Fire.
What happens when a new Mushi comes up and how they would react to it? At first, you'd see that they're clearly trying to document it, trying to see what happens. But because it's become such a huge threat, people are panicking and they don't know how they're going to deal with it. So humans will always try to fend for survival. They will usually act on instinct themselves before they think. It shows that there's consequence to their actions. People of the village were starting to die of frostbite because of what they did, and it was a really kind of tragic episode. Even though it seemed like Ginkgo was a bit too perfect in this episode specifically, because he was just like, guys, we need to stop this, man. We just gotta think through this. And it felt like Ginkgo was less of a middleman, and I just didn't like this episode too much because of that.
Episode 25, Eye of Fortune, Eye of Misfortune.
What happens when you get what you wanted and yet you just cannot handle it? Even though you get what you wanted in the end of it, you sometimes got in too much and you just cannot be happy with it.
Right, and you get more than you asked for. And I think it's almost similar to those kinds of stories of making a deal with the devil. You get what you want, but then maybe you get too much of what you want. And I think that aspect of this episode made it very interesting and something that I was intrigued by.
And I just like that message because it wasn't overzealous. It wasn't trying to overplay it in some of the episodes I was mentioning. It just was a very simple idea of what happens when you get too much. And I really love that show for that simple message they was trying to get across.
And episode 26, The Sound of Footsteps on the Grass.
It's a nice sort of character piece. And like other attempts that the show had at character building, it was nice. It just told about this guy's friendship with his child and how he feels attached to his home and how he developed this friendship and how he feels both betrayed and sort of can't go with the guy, but also feels like he needs to stay and help out his... It was a very nice episode, and I really did appreciate its detail in this regard. It was simple, it didn't try to overplay like the other episodes did, and I really liked it. And I especially like sort of the ending where Ginkgo just reflects like the old keeper of the mountain, and it's just like he just remarks and he infers that the other guy was the keeper of the mountain. It was like a very nice episode.
So overall, let's give me some of your impressions on what you thought of the first season and what you're maybe looking forward to in the second season.
In terms of episodic anime, probably the best way you can get it done right. It gives good attention to detail, is very subtle, gives good amount of depth, has some very nice animation, a very good soundtrack, very well directed. It's just one of those pieces I can actually say is worth your time and really is a great anime all around. Sure, there were some episodes that seemed weak and weren't particularly great in my opinion, but overall it was a great anime in my eyes, and I can really recommend it. The second season, the only thing I really wanted to do is maybe tie up a few loose ends in some of the other episodes that would really help me like it a little bit more. And maybe if they sort of expand a bit more on Ginkgo's character would make me like it. But overall, if they don't change too much, I think I'll still appreciate the second season for what it is. And overall, it should be a very good anime in my opinion.
Overall, I really enjoyed the first season of Mushishi. As far as episodic anime goes, it's one of my favorites, and I thought it did a really good job at being able to tell some quality stories throughout the series. I think it's one of the few anime that I can honestly consider spiritual, not really in a religious sense, but in the overall feel of it. The atmosphere it creates is relaxed and calming, and the world building is fantastic. The thing about a show like Mushishi is it's not the characters and it's not the story that really make it, but this world of Mushi that they make feel so genuine and so real. And for that, I think Mushishi separates itself from most of the other shows that have come out. While Ginkgo doesn't change much over the course of the series, I think this was done purposefully. I think that if Ginkgo was a character who developed, it would be difficult to watch the episodes in any order. I think the whole point of Mushishi is having a character like Ginkgo who is a complete character, who knows who he is and doesn't need to develop. He's static. He knows exactly what he needs to do and he completes his job. He's not the focus of the show. The Mushi are the focus of the show, but he's just part of a larger story. The same thing goes for the pacing of the show. While slow, it's fairly consistent throughout, and watching any episode in any order will not put you off to the series, much like some other series might. The duality of the Mushi is something I find quite beautiful, much like water in literature that can be both cleansing and soothing, but also violent, like a typhoon or a rainstorm. The Mushi can be calm and peaceful, one with nature, one with humanity, but also attack it and also become violent. Overall, I thought the ending of Mushishi was a bit lackluster. It didn't really close off anything. It didn't make the show feel complete. It didn't really feel like a last episode. It just felt like another one. And I would have liked to see a little bit more from the final episode. However, with the advent of the second season, I think this problem has been at least temporarily dealt with, and I'm hoping to see a bit more closure in the second season. As someone who likes to watch a single anime at a time, I found it difficult to find continuity with Mushishi. This might be more of a systemic problem that arises from anime that are episodic, but I found myself waiting many days between episodes. And if you're someone who watches things one at a time, it means you're not watching very much anime over the period of time that you're watching Mushishi. But I did realize that Mushishi, much like shows like Bartender or Kino's Journey, are animes that are meant to be enjoyed over a longer period of time, perhaps weekly, or perhaps with a cup of tea before you go to sleep. They're relaxing, they're soothing, and they're not meant to be taken all at once. And so this criticism is more of a general comment. I thought the continuity could have been a little bit better, but it didn't stop me from watching the show, and it doesn't really affect much of my rating on it overall. Looking to spring 2014, there aren't a lot of shows that I'm particularly excited for. Sure, the new JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is coming out, and there are a couple of semi-interesting sports animes this season, but really the one show that I'm looking forward to is Mushishi, and the second season should promise to be much like the first season, with a lot of the same content. Hopefully we get a nice wrap-up of the series. Maybe they'll do a little bit better job on the characters overall, but I really am interested in just seeing some more Mushi and some more stories involving them. I think it's somewhat rare for an anime that's 8 or 9 years old to get a new season. Generally what we'll see is a new season after a couple of years, or a new adaptation like the Yamato franchise or the Legend of the Galactic Heroes franchise many years down the road. So for something of this age to get a second season, I was very surprised. However, I am more than happy to watch it. I will be watching this season weekly, and I can't wait.
And with that end, I'm glad to say that we finished Mushishi, and we'll be back for the second season.